I never imagined that a simple phone call could dismantle 35 years of marriage. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day when sunlight slanted through the kitchen window, and everything felt peacefully predictable. Then Everett's phone began to ring on the counter. Normally, I would have ignored it. Decades of trust had taught me to respect his privacy, but something about the persistent vibration made me pick it up. The caller ID showed an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. What I heard next changed everything. My husband's voice, low and casual, drifted through the line. 2 more weeks of giving her the medication, he said. Then we can have her committed and finally be together. A woman laughed softly. I can't wait, baby. She's already so confused. My stomach twisted as I recognized the voice, Era, my daughter-in-law. My hands shook. The woman I had welcomed into my family, the nurse who brought me home-cooked meals and vitamins, was conspiring with my husband to destroy me. I dropped the phone, my heart hammering so hard it seemed to shake the room. For months, I had felt foggy, forgetful, exhausted. I'd blamed age, menopause, maybe stress. Now I knew the truth. They were drugging me, preparing to have me declared incompetent. When Everett came downstairs minutes later, I was washing dishes as though nothing had happened. He asked casually if anyone had called. I smiled, said it was just a telemarketer, and watched the man I'd loved for more than 3 decades scroll through his messages without a flicker of guilt. That night, Ara arrived with her usual casserole. You look tired, Mom Morrison, she said sweetly. I added extra herbs for memory and energy. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to smile. You're so thoughtful, dear. I played the part of the grateful mother-in-law while silently noting every movement, the way she sprinkled something into my portion, how she insisted I finish it all. Her beauty, once radiant, now looked reptilian to me. When Everett joined us, his hand lingered on her shoulder, longer than necessary, his smile too familiar. The sight made bile rise in my throat, but I kept my expression blank. They believed I was weak, fogged by their pills. That was their mistake. After dinner, while they chatted in the living room, I slipped into Everett's office. His computer password hadn't changed in years. It was still my birthday. What I found nearly made me collapse. Emails to psychiatric facilities, messages to lawyers about adjusting our will inquiries about long-term care homes, all dated within the last few months. My husband and daughter-in-law weren't just plotting an affair. They were preparing to erase me. I deleted my search history, locked the office, and returned to the kitchen before they noticed I was gone. The casserole sat half-eaten on the counter, its surface gleaming like poison. That night, I lay beside Everett, pretending to sleep while his breathing turned slow and steady. Rage pulsed through me like electricity. How many nights had he lain next to me dreaming of another woman? How many mornings had he kissed me goodbye, knowing he was poisoning my coffee? I whispered into the darkness. You have no idea who you're dealing with. By dawn, I had a plan. The next morning, I hid 3 of Ara's vitamins in a plastic bag and replaced them with real supplements. My mind already felt clearer after skipping the previous night's dose. I called my old friend Margaret, a retired lab technician, and arranged to meet her at a cafe across town. I need these tested, I told her, and I need you to tell no one. She agreed without hesitation. Then before Everett woke, I searched Ara's purse, which she often left in the guest room. Inside, I found a small vial of clear liquid syringes and handwritten dosage notes. Morning dose 2 milliliters in coffee. Increase weekly. My blood ran cold. They were monitoring my decline like scientists observing a specimen. I photographed everything, replaced the items exactly, and waited for Everett to appear. When he finally came downstairs, smiling as if nothing were wrong, I poured his coffee with hands that no longer trembled. "Morning, honey," he said. "Don't forget your vitamins." I nodded obediently and swallowed one of the harmless capsules. "You and Ara take such good care of me," I murmured. He patted my hand. "We just want what's best for you." That evening, Ara returned with another special dinner. I acted dazed, forgetting small things, slurring my words just enough to convince her the drugs were still working. She looked pleased. "You're adjusting well," she said softly. "Soon you'll feel calmer than ever." While she wasn't looking, I noticed her slip something from her pocket into my plate. So subtle, so practiced. I forced myself to eat a few bites, then excused myself to rest. Instead, I hid in the hallway and filmed her through the cracked door as she whispered on the phone, "She's declining fast. A week, maybe 2. That was all the confirmation I needed. By the time Everett returned from his walk the next morning, I had already ordered a set of miniature security cameras disguised as everyday objects, picture frames, vases, clocks. If they wanted to destroy me, I would use their own confidence against them. Over the next few days, I perfected my act. I misplaced my keys, forgot names left the stove on. Everett's pitying smile grew each day. "We'll get you the help you need, darling," he'd say, and I'd nod, hiding my satisfaction. When Margaret called 3 days later, her voice trembled. "Faye, those capsules are full of sedatives and anti-anxiety medication. The dosage could have killed you if it increased any further. You have to go to the police." I thanked her, but told her I needed a little more time. I didn't just want justice. I wanted confession. So I invited everyone to dinner that Saturday. Everett, Ara, and my son David, who still thought his wife was an angel. I also called my daughter Sarah, but asked her to arrive unannounced. The trap was set. On Saturday evening, as sunset painted the house gold, I laid the table with Everett's favorite foods and hid the cameras throughout the dining and living rooms. When he walked in, he kissed my cheek. "You've outdone yourself, sweetheart." I smiled, feeling the weight of my secret pressing against my ribs. I wanted tonight to be special. David arrived at 6 p.m. with flowers and the open, trusting smile that had always made me proud, and Ara swept in behind him, carrying a glass dish and a new amber bottle. For cognitive support, she said lightly, placing it in my hands, as if she were gifting me a future. Everett hovered close to her, not touching, but aligned in a way I had taught myself to ignore. Shoulders tilted toward each other, eyes meeting a fraction too long. I heard the front door again at 6:15 p.m., the bell, a bright chime that rang through the tension like a tiny hammer. Sarah stood on the porch, puzzled, a tote bag slung over her shoulder. "Mom," she said, glancing past me at the set table, "I thought you wanted this to be just us." I let my face flicker with confusion. "Did I?" I asked softly. I must have forgotten. Across the room, Everett and Ara exchanged a look that could have been mistaken for concern anywhere else. Here, under the gaze of 3 hidden cameras, it registered as calculation. We ate in a fragile calm. The daylight thinned and the chandelier cast ovals of warm light across the tablecloth. I watched Ara's hands as she served my portion, precise as a pianist's the spoon, pausing a heartbeat longer over my plate than anyone else's. Everett spoke in soothing phrases about rest and vitamins, about Dr. Hamilton, and the comfort of specialists who understand. David kept praising the meal, oblivious, but eager to keep the peace, while Sarah's eyes moved like a metronome. Ara, me, Everett, something profoundly wrong settling into her posture. Finally, when the plates were half finished and the wine deepened our breathing, I lifted my glass. "To family," I said, and I heard how clear my voice sounded in the space. "To the people we trust most in the world." Crystal tapped crystal. Smiles rose and wavered. I set my glass down and reached into my purse. The amber bottle clicked against the wood. "These are not vitamins," I said, steady as the stem of a glass. A lab analysis found sedatives and anti-anxiety medications in combinations that impair memory, judgment, and focus. At slightly higher doses, they can depress breathing. Margaret confirmed it this morning. David's fork fell a dull clatter on porcelain. Ara blinked once, then slid easily into rehearsal. "Mom Morrison, you've been so stressed lately. You asked for help." Those are supplements recommended for women over 60. Then explain the syringes, I said. Explain the dosage notes in your purse. Explain why you whisper into your phone from my hallway that I'm declining fast while you sprinkle extra herbs into my plate. For the first time all evening, Ara faltered. Everett leaned forward, palms up, voice softened to the pitch he used when persuading people to donate at charity galas. Faye, there's context. You have been forgetting appointments, leaving the stove on. We were afraid you'd hurt yourself. You were afraid I'd interfere, I said, which is why you scheduled a psychiatric evaluation without telling me and began pricing long-term care homes. I know about the emails, Everett. Your password is my birthday. It always has been. Sarah stiffened, chair scraping softly over the rug. David looked from his wife to his father, confusion draining into something brittle and white. "What is happening?" he asked, and his voice fractured like a plate dropped on stone. Ara reached for his hand. He flinched as if burned. She tried a different key, gentle, patient. "David, your mom is misremembering things. Paranoia is a symptom. It's why we need to act quickly." I tapped my phone. "Let's hear the symptoms." I pressed play. Everett's voice, unmistakable, filled the room. 2 more weeks of giving her the medication. Then we can have her committed and finally be together. Ara's response followed, intimate and bright as a blade. "I can't wait, baby. She's already so confused." Silence cracked open under our feet. Sarah gasped. David's face whitened to the color of paper, then flushed an anguished red. He stood so fast his chair tipped wood, thudding against carpet. How long, he asked. He was not looking at me. He was looking at Ara. She held his gaze for 2 seconds, 3, then let it slide to Everett. He said, almost gratefully, 8 months. The number scissored the room. I felt it cut through me through the years, through every morning kiss and every shared joke. David's voice came again hoarse, and the drugs, Ara's composure, thinned to a filament. 6 months, she whispered. It was to keep her calm. She was alive. Sarah snapped her hands flat on the table. You dosed our mother to make her easier to remove. Everett tried to steer the wreckage. We were seeking care. Temporary, humane care? I laughed then, sharp and startled by its own sound. Humane care that begins with a $2 million life insurance increase 8 months ago. Humane care that requires affairs and forged narratives. His eyes flickered the briefest glance that told me the policy detail had found its mark. I leaned back. You thought you could make me doubt myself. You nearly succeeded. But you underestimated what happens when fog lifts. Ara's voice edged toward a cornered hiss. You can't prove any of this. I let the second reveal land softly. You're on 3 cameras, I said. Dining room, mantel, bookshelf. Your movements over my plate. Your words. His. My lab results. Your notes. David made a sound I had never heard from him, a low, broken thing that belonged to an animal in a trap. He turned to his father. You were my example, he said, and you used that to teach my wife how to destroy us. Everett tried to rise, to reach, to do something managerial with his hands, but David stepped back like he was avoiding a cliff edge. I want you out, he said, and the sentence, for all its quiet, tolled like a bell. I stood and gathered the amber bottle. My hands were steady. Levi told Everett and Ara, tonight, do not come back. The only reason the police are not here is because I wanted you to understand what you lost before the law takes the rest. Ara's chair screeched rage, finally flooding her features. You won't get away with this, she spat, but the threat felt small against the cords of evidence now strung across the evening. No, I said. You won't. They crossed the threshold with the dazed inelegance of people who have realized too late that all the exits are marked. When the door shut, silence pressed in, thick and aching. David sank into a chair and covered his face. Sarah came around the table and wrapped her arms around me, her cheek hot against my temple. For a long minute we stood like that, the three of us in a tangle of grief and steadiness, and I felt the first true breath I'd taken in months move all the way to the bottom of my lungs. "Tomorrow," I said softly, "we call the police, the lawyer, the bank, the doctor. Tonight, we breathe." The next morning, the house felt both hollow and alive. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, brushing across the table, where the wreckage of the previous night still lingered. Half-empty glasses, cold plates, a wine stain shaped like a question mark. I stood in that light for a long moment, feeling the strange balance of grief and relief. My husband and daughter-in-law were gone. My world had collapsed, but I was still standing. By 9 a.m., Sarah and David returned their faces drawn but resolute. Together we drove to the police station, a quiet convoy moving toward justice. I carried the amber bottle, the photographs of Ara's notes, and the USB drive filled with footage from the hidden cameras. The officers listened as I spoke, steady, detailed, unflinching. When they heard Everett's recorded voice talking about the medication and finally being together, the room changed. No longer a story of paranoia or misunderstanding, but a criminal act meticulously planned. They took my statement, logged the evidence, and assured me detectives would seize the rest of the materials from the house that afternoon. As I left one of them, a young woman with tired eyes touched my arm. "You did everything right," she said quietly. "Most victims never get this far." Back home, exhaustion settled into my bones like sand after a storm, but beneath it ran something new: clarity. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat with Sarah on the porch, while David paced the yard phone, pressed to his ear as he called a lawyer. He filed for divorce that same week. I couldn't bring myself to feel triumph, only a grim sense of inevitability. Ara's bright smile and gentle voice had once filled our home. Now her absence felt like disinfected air, sterile, but necessary. The investigation moved quickly. Lab results confirmed the capsules contained a cocktail of sedatives and anti-anxiety drugs. The dosage pattern matched Ara's handwritten notes. Detectives found emails between Everett and psychiatric facilities discussing a voluntary commitment for his deteriorating wife. There was even a draft of a new will on his laptop, leaving the majority of our assets to him and any subsequent spouse. Every discovery was a fresh cut, but each one made the truth undeniable. They were arrested within 2 weeks. The charges were heavy attempted murder, conspiracy, and elder abuse. I declined to see them when the officers offered me the chance for confrontation. What could they say that would make sense of it? That betrayal had been born of love, that they hadn't meant to go so far. There was nothing left to understand. I had already spent enough years analyzing Everett's silences, convincing myself that indifference was simply fatigue. The clarity of knowing was almost merciful. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of a small cottage on the edge of town morning light, spilling over potted herbs and fresh paint. The big house had been sold its memories, boxed and divided among my children. Here, everything was mine again: my colors, my quiet, my rhythm. The first morning I woke there, I noticed how still the world felt without suspicion, whispering through every breath. I could make coffee without wondering what floated in it. I could forget something trivial without fearing it meant madness. Freedom, I realized, was not loud or dramatic. It was the absence of fear. Sarah stopped by, often usually unannounced. She would bring legal documents or groceries, but mostly she came to sit. That morning she arrived around 10 a.m., laptop bag slung over her shoulder, eyes bright with purpose. The prosecutor called. She said, dropping a thick folder onto the table. "They've found something else." Inside were photos, transcripts, hospital records. Ara had done this before. At least 2 elderly patients under her care had died under suspicious circumstances. Both cases had been closed as natural causes. "They're reopening them," Sarah said. She's being charged with multiple counts of attempted murder. A chill ran through me, but it wasn't fear, it was awe at how evil could wear such an ordinary face. "And Everett?" I asked. Sarah's expression hardened. "He's trying to claim manipulation. Says Era seduced him, that he was coerced." I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. 35 years together, and he still thinks I don't see through him. When the verdict came months later, the headlines carried words like cold-blooded, predatory, calculated. Ara was sentenced to life without parole. Everett received 15 years. Watching their trial through the courtroom's sterile air felt surreal. I didn't cry. I had shed my tears long before in the shadows of my kitchen when I realized love could turn to poison in a single heartbeat. After the sentencing, Sarah hugged me so tightly I could feel her heart pounding through my shoulder. "It's over, Mom," she whispered. "They can't hurt you anymore." But I knew the truth. The hurt had already transformed. It wasn't something that needed curing. It had become the backbone of the woman I had become. That evening, I sat on my patio with a glass of wine and watched the sky fade into indigo. My garden swayed gently in the wind, the scent of mint and basil filling the air. David came by with takeout from a little Chinese place, his eyes softer than I'd seen in months. We ate under the string lights he had helped me hang when I moved in. "I've been thinking about leaving the city," he said, quietly tracing the rim of his cup. "Starting fresh somewhere no one knows my name." I smiled. "Sometimes you need to change the scenery to remember who you are." He nodded. "Is that what this place is for you?" I looked around the plants, the quiet, the steady hum of life. "It's me remembering who I was before I became who they wanted me to be," I said. "Someone who knows her own worth. Someone who will never be anyone's victim again." 3 weeks later, Sarah called with the final news. "It's done," she said simply. "The appeals failed. The sentences stand." I thanked her, and after we hung up, I stepped into my garden. The stars shimmered above the dark branches, patient and eternal. Somewhere far away, Everett was beginning his first night in prison. Era was counting years that would never end, and me, I was free. I raised my glass toward the sky. "To second chances," I said softly, "and to never forgetting that you're stronger than the people who try to break you." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of peace, of new beginnings of a life still unfolding. If Faye Morrison's story moved, you remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the strength we often forget we have. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in her place? I read every single one.